Well, good morning and welcome to all of you that could join us for our council meeting. It's our first look at the budget and the capital improvement plan, so we have a lot to cover today. We do have some guests with us this morning from Ghana that when they finish their breakfast, we may interrupt the council meeting to introduce them at some point. And always nice to have visitors here that we can meet and make friends with and show off our all-America city. So we will call the meeting to order. With us this morning. We have Kent Hoyer with Holy Cross Lutheran Church to provide an invocation, and following that invocation, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us for both of those. Is Kent Hoyer with us this morning? Good morning.
Please join me in prayer. Dear Father God, we come to you in humble thanksgiving, praising you for all of the tremendous blessings that we have in this country. We ask for patience, wisdom, strength, and your guidance, so that as leaders of your people, we lead as you would have us live, always honoring you through all of our deeds and words. Grant us an extra measure of your Spirit's presence today as the budgeting discussions begin, ever mindful of our responsibility to be good stewards of your gracious gifts. Grant us the perseverance to always lift each other up, mindful of the fact that we are all your children. We offer up all of these requests in the powerful name of Jesus our Savior. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I would add that if the vice mayor needs to leave, he's having a few back issues. I know this is always uncomfortable. We appreciate you making it, but we don't want you to be too uncomfortable. Thank you. There's some people we don't mind if they're a little uncomfortable, but you're not one of them. We have the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of July 16th, 2019. Any changes or corrections? Seeing none, I move that we approve those meeting minutes.
Second.
A motion and second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. I think we have one proclamation this morning. Good morning, Howard. We have a proclamation for the American with Disabilities Awareness Week. It's from the city of Wichita, founded in 1870. Our proclamation reads, whereas Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability relating to employment, access to public accommodations, and communications, ensuring civil rights for persons with disabilities. And whereas Title II of the ADA as amended, prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in all the services, programs, and activities provided or conducted by states and local governments, including the city of Wichita. And whereas the city of Wichita undertook a comprehensive inventory and analysis of all city facilities and programs and outlined in a transition plan the improvement steps needed to bring the city into full ADA compliance. And whereas under the leadership of the Independent Living Center Resource Center of Kansas Incorporated and David P. Culvert, numerous organizations have actively worked with their constituents and in the community to bring forth the promise of hope and freedom that was envisioned by the passage of the ADA and embodied in the city's transition plan. So now therefore be it resolved that I, Jeff Longwell, Mayor of the City of Wichita, along with the Wichita City Council, note that the 29th annual celebration of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act on July 26th, and do hereby take this occasion to proclaim the city of Wichita as one of the most accessible cities in the United States in recognition thereof, and the City Council for the City of Wichita joins with communities across the country to acknowledge July 22nd through 27th of 2019 as Americans with Disabilities Awareness Week, which begins a year-long commemoration of the goal of accessibility for all in Wichita, and urge all citizens to wholeheartedly recognize this celebration throughout the year. And we present this to you, David, and this podium does lower, but it goes the other direction, so.
I know. Maybe I could use manager's.
That would be perfect. You can. You have to turn that on.
I don't know. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This is an all-encompassing proclamation covering the passage of the ADA 29 years ago and the dedication of the city of Wichita to making the necessary changes. On behalf of the Independent Living Center, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Access Advisory Board, and the roughly 100,000 citizens with disabilities in the metropolitan area, I'm proud to accept the proclamation. There are many people here who are members of the Access Board and members of the Board of Directors of the Independent Living Center. The progress that has been made could not have been accomplished without the efforts of innumerable people. The board of the Independent Living Resource Center got the ball rolling in 2004, and the members of what is now the Wichita-Sedgwick County Access Advisory Board have offered assistance over the years. I served as chair of the advisory board for the first 13 years of its existence and was released from bondage last year. I was gratified in what we accomplished over that time. We saw the replacement of the Kansas Coliseum by Intrust Bank Arena, an inaccessible facility replaced by a totally accessible facility. The Advanced Learning Library, the Dwight D. Eisenhower National Airport, and now the new baseball stadium on the horizon, and on the farther horizon, what do we do with Century 2? Wheelchair ramps cover the city, and audible pedestrian signals for the blind are at strategic intersections. New construction of public accommodations like retail businesses and movie theaters are now ADA compliant when they are built. There are some folks that I must thank by name over the past 15 years, even at the risk of others that I should also thank. The advisory board includes four members that have been there from the beginning: Ed Kuhn, Dr. David Walde, and Sanford Alexander, and Tiffany Nickel. And I thank them for their assistance. Following the creation of a massive transition plan, which was adopted well over 10 years ago in this chamber and stacked from here to here, well over 2,000 pages, it was given to Migwi Karugi. Migwi is an architect with the Public Works and Utilities Department, and he managed all those changes throughout the city and ensured that the transition plan was followed and completed. Over the past 10 years, the city's ADA coordinator was Dr. Brian Kuhn of the Engineering Department, who took over for Jeannie Goodwin from the city manager's office. His expertise ensured the compliance, and his passion for the ADA created a proactive atmosphere in the city's departments responsible for that compliance. And most of all, I want to thank Jay Hinkle of the city's law department for his visionary approach to the ADA over the past 15 years. While the ILRC got the ball rolling for change, Jay got the ball rolling from his side of the fence. Working together over a 6-month period, he and I were able to rip holes in that fence. And over the last 15 years, I think just working together, the two of us have participated in tearing it down. We began a partnership then with the disability community and the city of Wichita, and that partnership now consists of more people than we have time to list. I'm proud of what we did as a partnership. I'm proud of the city of Wichita and the supportive staff that we have had over the years, and it's going to get even better. Thank you for letting me take so much time.
In our community that need a voice, and so we appreciate it. Do want to take this opportunity at this moment to recognize the delegation that is here with us from Ghana, and we have several people that are responsible for bringing this delegation to Wichita, but I would ask that the Queen Mother, who is here on this trip, to stand up and be recognized. Queen Mother, if you would welcome to Wichita. And thank you for all of the work that you all have done to bring the Queen Mother to Wichita and to welcome her to our great city, and a chance again to show it off and make new friends. And we appreciate the wonderful gift that you provided this morning. Thank you very much. So, Madam Clerk, do you want to call the next item, please?
George Theo Harris, the state of the city according to Theo.
City Council, City Manager, City Legal, Mayor. I wanted to end with this, but I will stop by asking, as the neighborhood president of Grandview Heights and where Clapp Park sits, to be on the Clapp Park Master Plan. Many have said it's not that we don't believe or trust the city to do the right thing, but they don't trust or believe the city to do the right thing. I want to ensure we keep Clapp Park the color of my shirt and keep the wolves away from it, 2- and 4-legged variety. We had a proactive pilot program for MABCD, and it cost District 3 $100,000 plus from the Hyatt money. And it was successful, but it ended in December of 2018. Here are 17 plus items from 430 houses and apartments in Grandview. The director, Chris Labram, is a great leader over there, but I'm concerned people under him are always telling us why they can't do something. Leading to point 3, I asked him if he would take over animal control care. He said it needed to be funded and manned correctly, but in the end, he said no, it's probably not a good fit. His next 2 levels of supervision under him couldn't back away from it faster at the Wind Cow meeting last Friday. Somebody needs to take over the whole operations up there. The police have too much other crime to be concerned with to deal with cats and dogs. 5 of the 6 cities our size, Minneapolis, Tulsa, Omaha, Cleveland, New Orleans, Arlington, there's only 1 that is run by the police department. The rest are run by different agencies. And in Cleveland, is run by the police department, their bites and attacks to postal carriers is off the charts. Speaking of bites and attacks to postal carriers, 2 years ago, we were at 18. Last year, they were at 12, and so far this year, as of Wednesday, they were at 4. They spent some money and put out a larger card to educate. We need to educate like they did. Our bites and attacks are getting out of control. Why, you might ask? A committee was formed and had the dangerous dog ordinance rewritten with shall fines. And our prosecutors and or judges are waiving or lessening them. Plea bargaining, shall fines. Unbelievable. The current animal board is made up of 7, waiting on a replacement from District 5. And we'll have 8. They tried to push through a TNR program, which although at some level needed, they would allow any and all who wanted 8 feral cats to live next door. Animal care can't keep up with the level 1 and 2 calls, so how would they handle a priority 3 nuisance call about feral cats being in our yards? In closing, we need to add or get to the number of police needed. We need to add more MABCD inspectors. We need to add more animal care officers, and let there be a thorough look at animal care and their operations. Take animal care away from the police and hand it off to another agency in the city, as in 5 of the 6 other cities mentioned earlier. Find out why Animal Care Advisory Board is looking out for niche citizen groups and not the will of the majority of neighbors. The TNR was voted against by the one vet and a longtime animal welfare person who has stints on the Humane Society. Those are the people we need to listen to. Don't let our neighborhood safety ever be put in jeopardy again because of tightwads and penny pinchers. Police and fire and MABCD are expensive. Without them, it is expensive also. Please step up. The mayor has always listened to me and my neighbors' concerns. I have a 99% callback rate with him because he cares. That is why we voted early today, this morning, for him. And then I wanted to just say, I had 3 attacks in the last year and a half. I wasn't bitten. And all 3 of them were screwed up by animal control. One of them put me in the ER with an elevated heart rate, and there was no fine levied against that. Unbelievable. Please look at animal control and get it fixed. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Jane Burns, painting crosswalks around all Wichita schools, including busy streets such as 13th Street.
Hello, my name is Jane Burns. I'm speaking personally today, not on behalf of any organization. I grew up in the north end of Wichita and walked to St. Patrick's Elementary, close to the Arkansas River, every school day. Some of you may also have walked to school. Some of your children may have. Few of your grandchildren do or will. Walkability safety is a concern in Wichita, and that's not crime, as some adults fear. Many parents don't expect or enable children to walk to school or to enable the health of that physical activity. It's just escaped our notice. A major disincentive to that health is safety, kids versus cars. In fact, kids, families, and neighbors, including seniors. I often advocate for those 2 particular groups who will especially benefit from the health and independence of walking: seniors and students. Most children and students do have more time and energy than their chauffeuring parents. And honestly, I found that kids like to walk, like to be outside. Both of those groups, seniors and students, just need shoes and safety. So here's my safety request today: crosswalks. Crosswalks are the visual cue to walkers that they too deserve a piece of public streets, but also crosswalks are a signal to car drivers that others share the streets they think of as their own. Our streets belong to everybody, including the handicapped person we just enjoyed hearing. And by the way, I wanted to point out that the consultant that helped put together the pedestrian master plan pointed out that 20% of morning traffic, morning rush hour traffic, is cars getting kids to school. What if kids were getting themselves to school? Today I'm here to respectfully ask for safety around the 100 or so schools in Wichita. The University of Kansas Medical Department of Preventive Medicine and Public Health heroically began this spring recruiting volunteers to work with Wichita Public Works to paint crosswalks around schools. Volunteers painted crosswalks so far at 3 schools. That's Kinsler, Woodland, and Horace Mann, and will this Friday paint crosswalks at Jefferson Elementary. That's districts 5 and 6 and 3 so far. They didn't paint crosswalks on the busiest street, such as 13th north of Horace Mann. Too many cars there. Students at those 4 schools will have greater safety, along with their healthful physical activity, fresh air, independence, low cost, and the bonus of alleviating car congestion. And so will their school staff, families, and neighbors. I was told that the city council, not you all, surely, cut the budget for public works, including painting crosswalks, in the recession of 2008. I know that we in Wichita know the value of walkability, the independence, the economic value, the recreational benefits of walkability from Delano, from Old Town, from downtown. So is it not now time to restore that funding for our children, their families, their neighbors? Are our children not worth that? My goal today is to alert you all to notice that crosswalks around our schools are pale, faded, and safety around schools then is also sacrificed. Crosswalks don't appear important to some folks, but I plead that crosswalks are important, that paint and labor is budget money well spent on the health and safety of children and their families and their neighbors. Our children are important. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Jane. Madam Clerk, next speaker.
Shirley Starr, Saving Century 2.
Well, I didn't bring my notes, but I guess I can say what I want to say. It's been quite a while ago when the people that come here, when I was here, and they wanted to put the apartments here on Douglas. And then I was very concerned about Century 2, afraid that if they did, that you guys would try to tear Century 2 down. And I'm still worried about that. And maybe it's a coincidence, but for I don't know how long, I used to watch the news, and it always shows Century 2. And I don't see it anymore, and I'm thinking, is that what they're trying to do, is to get used to the Century 2 being gone? But anyway, I hope you guys don't tear Century 2 down. And when you bring up about repairs and stuff, well, then I blame you guys for the repairs because you guys let things go too long. Just like the Coliseum. We all love that Coliseum. And people are still talking about the Coliseum. We don't like the entrust. And so I'm afraid that's what's going to happen to Century 2. If you guys would keep things repaired as it's needed, there wouldn't be a big expense. It's just like a home. You have to do the upkeep of a home too. You just can't keep buying a home because you need to work on it. And I hope you guys don't tear Century 2 down.
Thank
Okay?
you. Madam Clerk, next speaker.
Mayor Warren Carter called this morning and canceled. So the next speaker is Jeannie Tollfree, Corruption in Wichita Government.
I don't know that Jeannie has made it into the chambers. Jeannie Tollfree with us this morning, going once. All right, Madam Clerk, next item.
Consent agenda items 1 through 15.
Any items need to be pulled for discussion or clarification on consent agenda items 1 through 15? Seeing none, I move that we approve consent agenda items.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Report of Board of Bids and Contracts dated July 22nd, 2019.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Hannah Lang, Department of Finance. Today I present to you the July 22nd Board of Bids formal bid report. First engineering bid we have is Lincoln Street Water and Sewer Replacement. Recommendation is Donlinger and Sons Construction for $785,773. Install of water utility service lines. Recommendation is to defer to the August 5th Board of Bids date. Road enclosure gates for Old Town. Recommendation is traffic control services for $55,650. That's all the bids. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Robert, I think we've done it once. We've asked that on a quarterly basis that we summarize and certainly share in the different categories. Every week we now share where we're spending dollars and who those dollars are awarded to, but I think it's also helpful to get that summary, and I'm not sure when our next summary was due, but should have been any time. And let's, again, continue to share in those categories where we're investing in infrastructure. If there's no questions, I move that we award the bids as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
Public hearing and a request for a letter of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds, Webb Industrial LLC.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Tim Goodpasture with the City's Office of Economic Development. For the record, the item before you today is a request for a letter of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds for Webb Industrial LLC. In December of 2017, the City Council approved a new speculative industrial and flex space program. To qualify, developers would have to build a minimum of 100,000 square feet, which would not be divisible below 25,000 square feet, to try to encourage large spaces being available in the market. The developers would also have to build a minimum of 28-foot clear height, and tilt-up concrete is preferred but not required. Developers also must start construction within 120 days of City Council approval and complete the project within 15 months of City Council approval. The developers must use IRBs, and they would be awarded a 95% abatement for the first 5 years and a 50% abatement for the second 5 years if the property is at least 50% leased at the 5-year mark. Webb Industrial LLC is a single asset entity that was recently formed by Ivan Crossland Jr., Dave Murphin, and Steve Barrett. Ivan Crossland and Steve Barrett built 250,000 square feet of speculative industrial space under the previous spec policy at 29th Street North in Ohio, and Steve Barrett and some other partners built 140,000 square feet of spec space in 2008. So they have quite a bit of history with building speculative industrial space. Webb Industrial intends to build a 136,000 square foot spec warehouse with a total investment of $11 million. The property is located at Tobin and 40th Street, which is near Webb Road and 40th Street, and is requesting a letter of intent for IRBs in an amount not to exceed $11 million. This aerial here shows the area outlined in blue where the property would be located. You can see Webb Road not quite halfway through the aerial. On the east side of Webb Road, you can see the National Center for Aviation Training and the north end of the runway at Jabara Airport. These are some architectural renderings of what the property would look like. Again, that would be tilt-up concrete that would be used for this property. Again, they're intending to build 136,000 square feet with 24 dock-high doors, 3 overhead doors, and 32-foot clear height, which is above the requirement of 28 feet. The value of 1 year of a 95% abatement, assuming that the Central County Appraiser's Office appraises the $11 million investment at approximately 80% of that, since we rarely see a dollar-for-dollar increase in valuation, would be approximately $57,500 for the city and $206,000 for all taxing jurisdictions. A cost-benefit analysis was completed by the Center for Economic Development and Business Research at Wichita State University, which showed an overall benefit of 1.39 to 1 for the city, 1.27 to 1 for the city's general fund, and 1.53 to 1 for the city's debt service fund. Therefore, it's the staff's recommendation that the City Council close the public hearing, adopt the resolution of intent, and authorize the necessary signatures. Dale Ward with Hinkle Law Firm is here on behalf of Webb Industrial, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Councilmember Fry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tim,
Yep.
since we adopted this new program, how many projects have come through?
So the City Council has approved 2 projects prior to this. One is with Michaelis, which is building 100,000 square feet up near 35th and Webb Road, and then Jeff Lang, who is building 100,000 square feet at the Iron Horse Industrial Center in southwest Wichita. So this would be the 3rd project approved.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
We'll now go out to the public. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item?
Myron Ackerman. One thing that I see missing in this presentation is these builders have built spec buildings with city money previously. What is the status of those? Are they in compliance with the requirements of each of those issues?
So we'll take a list of all the questions and try and answer them at the end of all the speakers.
Okay. That's my main concern, is that if we are continuing to give speculative contracts, regardless of who they go to, I'm very much not in favor of the city involving itself in speculative development. I think there's more than enough private funds for economic development in terms of industrial parks. But regardless of who they go to, as long as they meet these requirements, but if we are continuing to give the same or different combinations of people the same speculative building contracts, I'd like to know that the ones they've already done have been successful. Because if they've built something that, like this one, needs to be 50% leased in 5 years, well, if that's the situation on a on a previous one, how much of the space do they have rented, and what is the time frame? So I just want, I want a past performance to know if the city's going beyond what is reasonable for speculative buildings. And from my perspective as a taxpayer and investor, there's no excuse for the city to be in speculation.
Thank you. I don't think we have any questions. But you do know that we have clawback provisions now. We have placed clawbacks if they don't meet the policy, then they lose out on the tax abatements. And the other thing you mentioned, the city's not investing in the cost of building. So all of it is private dollars. 100% of building is private dollars.
We can play the semantics game. What I want to know is, have any of those clawbacks been used against these contractors?
All right, thank you.
All I see is that they've done it before. I'd like to see performance to
Okay.
date.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No other speakers. We'll bring the discussion back to the bench. Do we have, Tim, past history that we can share?
Sure. Some of these have come up for compliance reviews, and some of them will not be up for compliance reviews for another 2 to 3 years. One of the buildings that Steve Barrett and partners built in 2008 was 140,000 square feet. At the 5-year mark, that property was 100% occupied and was very successful, and continues to actually be 100% occupied today. The Shannon family built a 90,000 square foot building under the previous spec industrial policy. It did come up for a 5-year review, I believe last year. It was 100% occupied at that time. Jeff Lang built 100,000 square feet under the previous policy. It will not be up for review for another 3 years, but it is occupied by one single tenant, Cosmic Pet. Steve Barrett and Ivan Crossland built 250,000 square feet, which will not be up for another, I believe, 3 years for review, and they are nearly fully occupied.
Well, thank you, and we appreciate that update. I think our speaker left already before he heard your answer, so appreciate that. So again, we are one of the few communities that both have a clawback provision in there and then a minimum return on investment. A lot of communities don't have either. We have both. But it's nice to get that update and hear that the programs have been very successful, and we want to encourage people to continue to invest. And I think we can all probably make the argument, when you look at where our budget is today, it's because of many of these investments that we've enjoyed a robust budget the last couple of years. And much of that is because these investments that we've been making over multiple years are paying dividends, and a return on that investment oftentimes of more than 1.3 to 1. And so it's making a difference, and we'll hear part of that difference today in receiving the first budget from staff. So I will turn it over to Councilmember Tuttle and let her proceed forward.
Absolutely, and thank you, Tim, because of the information that you so quickly provided. Appreciate that, and that just reinforces my decision to move that we close the public hearing, adopt the resolution of intent, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second? We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
2020 Annual Operating Budget and 2019-2028 Capital Improvement Program.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased today to present to you the recommended 2020-2021 operating budget as well as the 10-year capital improvement program. As you know, a few years ago, the council wanted to do a more comprehensive approach to our budgeting to make sure that we did a better job of linking our CIP with our operating budget. And so you will have both of those presented to you today, and we'll try to talk about how those link as a little further into the presentation. A reminder, as we started the budget process, some of the things that were important. First of all, to stay true to our mission that was adopted a few years ago, and as you know, the budget is organized around the key pillars of the mission. I'll talk about that in just a second. We continue to try to increase our engagement with the community and get more feedback through the budget process, and I'll talk about that. It was really important as we were going through the zero-based budgeting a few years ago that we focus on our core and on what we would call, on our core services, and that we really focus on service excellence. And that what we provide, we do it in a way that meets the needs of our residents, and we do it in a professional manner as well. And then, of course, always we want to make sure that our budget ensures fiscal sustainability for the future. Just a reminder about our mission, there are 5 pillars. First of all, the first one is that we have a well-run city, and then the other 4 are listed there in terms of keeping Wichita safe, growing our economy, building and maintaining a dependable infrastructure, and then providing conditions for living well. We've talked about this in retreat, and we had a pretty robust engagement process this year. We, for the first time, used a budget simulator tool, had over 1,400 people that participated in that, put themselves in your shoes and tried to come up with a balanced budget. And I think we got a lot of really good comments from folks that went through that process. They understood the difficulty that you go through every year, and many of them said, I think they just gave up and said, I'd be willing to support a tax increase in order to go forward. We also, as we have in the past, went out to the district advisory boards and also continued our social media town hall. Happy to say that there were over 80,000 views, and we had over 700 comments as part of that process. Jumping into the total budget, we're over $600 million, $624 million actually, in terms of our total expenditures. If you look at the pie chart on the left-hand side, you'll see that our #1 revenue source for the entire budget is charges for services, and that's primarily because of our utility operations. On the right-hand side is where that money goes for the total budget, and as you can see, the top category is salaries and benefits, with debt service coming in behind that. Now let's take it down to the general fund, which is the part of the budget that the public really focuses on. And there you'll see the property taxes are #1 revenue source, followed by franchise fees, and also 20% going to what we call other sources, which are a number of other revenue categories. In looking at the revenues for 2019, 20, and 21, especially 19 and 20, it's important to know that we've had good assessed valuation growth, better than what we had originally projected. We are in a very strong economic environment right now, and so our interest in investment earnings have been better than we originally anticipated. That's primarily in 2019. I'm not quite sure that we'll be in that as strong an environment in 2020. We've also had better sales tax receipts than we expected, which again reflects well on the local economy. And then on the downside, our fines and penalties continue to underperform from our projections. On the expenditure side, first of all, the pie chart on the left shows the major expenditure categories in terms of function. If you take our public safety, which is police and fire, and add to it public works and utilities, you'll see that that's 72% of your budget. So what you would call kind of our bread and butter services are the majority of our budget. The next highest then comes in as parks at 7%. And then what we talk about every year is that if you break it down by expenditure category, salaries and benefits represent a majority of our budget. That's 74%. And if you remember, during really tough times that we went through during the recession, that was the most difficult part of balancing our budget, because that was the only way we're going to be able to do it is through changes in our personnel structure. Let's talk about some of the highlights from this operating budget, and this is probably a lot more fun to talk about than we've had in many years. Last year, council approved the first phase of the police staffing study and added 31 positions to the budget for the police department, 20 officers and 11 civilians. Those were in a special category in last year's budget. Now they're rolled into the police budget for 2020. We also have 7 grant positions that have been working on the Broadway corridor, and those grant funds are expiring. We're recommending that those positions be shifted to the property tax and stay in the police budget, but that obviously has a significant impact on the 2020 budget. You heard from a speaker about the Hyatt money that was used for a pilot project in code enforcement. One of the concepts that came out of that is that we wanted someone to coordinate volunteer efforts and try to get outside groups to help with property maintenance, especially with residents who are unable to make those improvements themselves. And so we're recommending that the general fund pick up permanently the cost of the code enforcement liaison, who serves as that the go-between between those in need and those who are willing to help address that need. As you know, we've had concerns about fire overtime and making sure that we have proper staffing on all of our shifts. And so we've added some funds to this upcoming budget to try to better address that issue going forward. We've spent a lot of time talking about the integrated care team, and that's where we'll have a police officer, a firefighter, and a paramedic assigned on a unit that will respond throughout the community. That pilot project is ready to start a little later this year.
I'm going to stop you there for a
Yes.
second. A police officer, a mental health
Oh, I'm
worker,
sorry.
and
Mental health, yes, I'm sorry.
And a
Someone
paramedic.
from ComCare, that's right. You broke my stride, and I'll have to start at the first slide. So that pilot program will start later this year, so we have money in the 2019 and 2020 budget for that. We are maintaining our funding for existing staffing levels at the branch libraries, but there'll be better focus in our operations at those branches based on the recommendations of the branch master plan. Also, you have adopted the aquatics master plan, and as a result of that, we'll have, starting in 2020, we'll have increased hours of operation, both on a daily basis as well as on a seasonal basis. And so our season will extend longer than it has in the past. And again, the nice part is that it's not just at the existing facilities, but we'll have, when it's all done, we'll have 12 new or remodeled facilities. One of the things that came out of our budget simulator, as well as what we heard through the social media town hall, is that folks wanted to see some more money go into park maintenance, and so we're able to put, I think, a little over $200,000 in additional funds for park maintenance. And then stemming from last year's discussions about cultural services, I've been working with representatives of Cowtown and City Arts to put together, and many of you have been involved in the City Arts discussion, to put together a new operational plan for each of those facilities. We have recommendations already for City Arts, and we'll have recommendations later this year for Cowtown. I talked about the linkage between the operating budget and the CIP. These are three good examples of how they're linked. I've already talked about the aquatics master plan and the library branch master plan. But then again, street maintenance, we have $3 million built in the operating budget annually, and then we'll have an ever increasing amount of funding available in the capital improvement program to aggressively deal with our street maintenance issues that we have in residential areas as well as on our arterials. The good news is we're able to do all this with stability in our mill levy rate. The rate will remain unchanged from 2019 when we move into 2020. I won't go into all the details on this. State has imposed on us a property tax lid, and we have not bumped up against that lid. We were close previously. We have some capacity this year, and the lid will not affect the 2020 budget. As we look forward to 2021 and beyond, I think the uncertainty that both the public and private sector face, not just here, but throughout the country, is what the state of our economy will be. There's been more and more talk by economists about a possible recession. And so with that whole idea of trying to maintain a budget that is financially sustainable, we're keeping that in mind and have taken some actions to help us should we see a downturn in the economy. Here's where we'll be if the council ultimately approves the budget. We're balanced in 2019, balanced in 2020, which is legally what you need to do. And then 2021, the council always wants to have a projection for that so that we have at least 3 years every year in front of you in the budget document. But we also project further out. And you'll see we do have a structural deficit that starts in 2021. We have some ideas on how we can use our process improvement efforts in order to try to close that gap and hope to be able to address a lot of that in 2021, and that will have ongoing benefit to us going forward. And the reason that we're semi-optimistic about our ability to do that is that we've had some success since we started our zero-based budgeting efforts. We did that in 2016, started to fine-tune that process as we went forward, and I'm really proud of some of the work that has been done by staff in order to bring some lasting improvements and some cost savings to the organization. I'm just going to highlight some of these. We've, just in the last few years, we've realized over $1 million in savings through these process improvements. We've changed the way that we're doing executive recruitment, relying more on some electronic tools that are available to our staff, and we have a person that specializes in recruitment for us. That saved us over $200,000 in what our contract cost had been previously. We have been more thoughtful in our review of our IT infrastructure, and many of what I would call our power users. Is important that we have the right tools in their hands, and so we continue to do full replacement for those folks. But for those that are not as reliant on technology, we found that we were able to go to upgrades of existing equipment, and that saved us almost $300,000, just that process change. A couple changes in finance that have resulted in over $150,000 of savings, including a reduction in pension management fees. And in Parks and Recreation, we went to an outcomes-based mowing contract. That was part of a project that we had on a smart city initiative. And as a result of that, we've saved about $160,000 in our mowing cost. And then something the council actually has talked about over the years, and that we're experimenting right now through a pilot project, and that is to rebuild some of our fire apparatus instead of buying new. There's 2 pumpers, if I remember correctly, that will be rebuilt, and we believe we'll save about $500,000 as a result of that. So as we go forward into 2020, we'll continue to work on process improvements just like the ones I've shared. We will make sure that we put technology in the hands of all of our employees and encourage them to work harder and be more focused on the use of that technology for innovation. And of course, as we have concerns about the future of the economy, we want to make sure that we maintain adequate reserves. I want to talk about some one-time things that we're doing in 2019 and 2020 to help position us for the future. We're moving money into our tort fund. As you know, that fund is supported through the property tax, but we're transferring funds in now so that that fund will not need to be replenished on a fairly frequent basis as we go forward. It still will need over time, but we're getting it back to an adequate level. We've created an innovation fund that will allow for technology improvements and purchases, which again keeps with the initiative with our employees. And then we're allocating some funds for the council for the implementation of the Places for People program. You'll ultimately determine the priorities of our implementation of that master plan, and also then how those dollars will be used. Other one-time funding, I'm really proud to say that we're going to buy a remote grapple saw. You all know that is my favorite part of this whole budget. It will result in significant savings in our forestry operation. Right now, what it'll do is lead to better efficiency and effectiveness as we go forward and try to meet the growing demand for tree removal of trees that are in the right-of-way. In our parks. Also, we put money aside to take care of a significant backlog in police records, and then we also are bringing on some software to help us better schedule our staff and to reduce overtime demands in the fire department. All of these are consistent with, again, what we heard from the public during our engagement process. So the next steps for the budget, you will formally have a hearing on August 6th and then be asked to adopt the budget on August 13th. That's all I have in the operating budget. If you'd like, Mayor, we can answer questions now about the operating budget, or I can turn over to Mark Manning. We can go through the CIP discussion and then handle all the questions at the end.
You ready to go through the capital also? Yeah, we'll do it that way, and then
Okay.
we can open up to the public.
I did have a question.
Yes.
Thanks, Mayor. Bob, will you be demonstrating that tree removal grapple saw?
We have a very robust safety program, and I don't believe they're going to let me in. I will be watching it a lot, but I won't be allowed to touch it, I'm sure.
So I had one specific question. So with the structural deficits, if we were to recoup our online sales tax revenue, would that help eliminate those going forward?
It will help reduce it. If I remember, our estimate is that we lose about $1 million annually. Is that about right? $1 million annually in sales tax for sales on the internet.
That was it.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Do you remember what the amount was that the increased amount that was going to go to the tort fund was?
For the
dollar figure?
Yeah, I 2.5 million, 2.25 million, excuse me.
Thanks. And where's those dollars coming from?
That's coming from property tax going into the tort fund. And again, by putting that amount aside, we're helping ourselves should we have a downturn and we still have demands. Normally, we don't put that much money into the tort fund and then you have to replenish it every year.
Let's work on having less demands coming out of the tort fund.
That would not be the first time I've heard you ask me.
What kind of balance do we generally run in that account?
In the tort fund? I don't know that I can give you an exact amount. We're about 1.2, a little over $1 million.
No other questions? Why don't you go ahead and get into the next part of your presentation?
Well, I still have the microphone. I want to thank Sean Henning, Elizabeth Goldtree-Wadle, and her entire staff, the budget staff, for the work that they've put into this year's budget. Mark Manning as well for the work he's done on the CIP. With that, we'll move on to the CIP discussion.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the City Council. Mark Manning with the Department of Finance. Today I want to talk about the 2019-2028 proposed CIP. And as the manager said, it is integrated very closely with the operating budget, so some of these slides may appear slightly redundant. As you know, the CIP is a 10-year plan for community improvements. It has 206 distinct projects. It is aligned with the Community Investments Plan, which is a long-term 25 to 30-year plan for investments in our area, improvements. It's also consistent with council policy direction. And finally, the CIP is designed to be financially viable. So let's look at the Community Investments Plan and the alignment of this CIP to the Community Investments Plan. The Community Investment Plan sets priority spending areas. And as you can see from this chart, 83% of the dollars in the CIP are allocated to the very high priority areas in the Community Investments Plan. The Community Investments Plan also sets overall spending priorities. The number one priority, overall spending priority, is to take care of what we have or maintain and replace what we currently have. You can see about 45% of the CIP dollars are allocated to this top spending priority area. And that is actually a little bit higher than what was in the previous CIP. Now, I would point out that one reason that the other two priorities are as large as they are is because special assessments, for example, is included as an expand, and some other large projects are included as an enhance. But I would tell you that most of the GO funding, which is property tax funding, is in the first category with a little bit in the second category. So on a more granular level, when we developed the CIP, we have developed a prioritization methodology which helps us evaluate all the individual projects in an empirical and objective manner in order to prioritize which projects are included in the CIP and what year they are included in. Again, this prioritization model is based on feedback we got from the City Council in 2018, and it has 4 broad areas. It prioritizes projects based on their alignment to the Community Investments Plan, which I just went over. It also scores projects in relation to other planning processes, most of which have been adopted and approved by the City Council. It also takes into account financial considerations of projects and whether they leverage other funds. And finally, there's a variety of other considerations which play a role in this prioritization of projects. So let's look at the overall CIP. The CIP is a 10-year plan, so this is a 10-year figure. but we expect the CIP to be about $2.4 billion. This is significantly larger than the last CIP. You may recall, I think it was in the neighborhood of $1.8 billion, and I'll discuss that in a second, but that's primarily due to water and sewer improvements. You can see from this slide that water and sewer utility-funded improvements are over half the CIP. GO at large property tax funded improvements is the little slice over there at about the 9 o'clock position. That's GO at large, that's about $300 million. Again, that slice is relevant because that's the portion that is funded mostly with property taxes. And you can see other slices are special assessments and a little bit of local sales tax and a variety of other funding sources. So let's look at where we spend those dollars at. And as you would expect, water and sewer projects, again, if they're financed over half the CIP, the expenditures are over half the CIP. And as I noted earlier, those two slices are bigger than they were last year, and that's because we have $880 million worth of projects for the biological nutrient removal project on the sewer side and the Northwest Water Treatment Project on the water side. You can see arterials is about $600 million. Again, that includes a sizable chunk of special assessed financed arterials. And then you can see we have a variety of other categories. So let's just look at the GO at large side. Again, this is primarily property tax funded projects, GO at large. Again, as I noted, that total is a little over $300 million. And you can see over half of our GO at large funded projects go to roads and to public safety. Let's talk about financial viability. As we like to talk about, we like for our metric that we use to demonstrate financial viability to be, we do not want to spend more than 67% of our revenue on debt service for property tax funded projects. So we use this little graph to demonstrate where we're at. The blue line there represents our benchmark. Again, that's about 67%. So we do not want to spend more than 67% of our revenues on debt service. And the black line demonstrates where we would expect to be in this proposed CIP. And this is very consistent with the theme that we have demonstrated over the last 3 or 4 years, in that we do expect our debt levels to increase and our metric to increase over the next several years, but we expect it to be within the benchmark level, and in fact, we would expect it to decline towards the outer years. Let me show you a similar slide. This shows our GO debt levels that are projected in this CIP. Now, the property tax funded portion of this is the really small bar at the bottom of the chart, which I think is blue. That shows our GO at large debt level. And you can see it in relation to the other components of GO debt. As a reminder, this chart does not show revenue bond debt, but I would also remind you, and we present this every quarter in the quarterly report, local property tax funded debt is approximately 5% of our total debt. So a very small portion of our total debt is GO at large or property tax funded debt. But the takeaway on this slide is we do expect debt levels to increase in the short term, as you can see by the bars on this chart. However, in the long term, we would expect them to decline. So overall themes in the projects that are included in this CIP. This CIP has an increase in road projects, and that's primarily in road maintenance, as the manager mentioned earlier. It does have a decrease in freeway spending, and that's because East Kellogg improvements are in progress and no longer appear in the CIP. And as I noted earlier, it has an increase in water and sewer projects, and that's primarily associated to the full funding included for the BNR and the Northwest Water Treatment Plant projects. Let's talk about sales tax briefly. As you know, we've had a sales tax in Wichita, or in Sedgwick County, since 1985. The city of Wichita gets a portion of that sales tax. We have pledged since 1985 to spend half of that for property tax reduction and half of that for use in the CIP. That half, of course, is the relevant half for today, and we spend that on roads, bridges, and freeways. And the city has maintained that pledge since 1985 to spend those dollars for roads, bridges, and freeways. So this CIP will have an emphasis on road maintenance. The manager talked about this. The blue line there is what was in last year's CIP, and you can see the red line is what is proposed in this CIP, and that is a significant increase. In fact, if you combine this with what we would expect to be included in the operating budget, This is $29 million more over the 10-year period for road maintenance. This, as you know, is a significant priority that we consistently hear from our residents when we present budget information, and this is designed to address that priority. The manager mentioned aquatics, so I won't talk about that very much, but suffice to say the CIP does include $20.8 million and is aligned to the aquatics master plan. Of course, we're going to spend a total of $22 million on aquatics. $1.2 million was previously approved by the City Council. The branch library master plan, as the manager noted, is also included in the CIP. That's $5.3 million to fund improvements at our 6 branch libraries, and you can see the schedule that is proposed on that slide. Public safety is a new category in the CIP this year. Previously, it had been included in public facilities, but we split it out this year because it's a significant investment. You can see the CIP has about $93 million for public safety. That will include the rebuilding of 4 police stations, the rebuilding of 3 fire stations, and a variety of funding for police and fire radios, fire apparatus, breathing equipment, and a variety of other public safety equipment. I hit the up button, sorry. Sorry about that. I got so excited about all the public safety equipment, I just lost focus and hit the wrong button. So next, let's talk about drainage improvements. As you know, in 2017, the City Council approved an adjustment to the ERU rate, and that has increased capacity in the Stormwater Utility Fund significantly. There's a number of stormwater and drainage projects that have been priorities, but consistently, the top priority for drainage improvements has been what we call Dry Creek on the east side of Wichita, or Bleckley Street by the VA hospital. That is a significant investment, but you'll see here in about 2 seconds that the CIP includes $36 million for improvements to Bleckley Street. And again, that's made possible due to the ERU adjustments that were approved in 2017, which we believe will provide additional capacity. I mentioned water and utilities improvements recently. Again, we've talked about this a lot in the past, but these appear fully loaded into this CIP for the first time, and so that's a significant increase in that section. Finally, let me talk about art spending in the CIP. As you know, for years, we have included aesthetic improvements in our CIP projects, and this is due to our design standards that were developed years ago in coordination with the Design Council. And we spend many millions of dollars on aesthetic improvements. In addition to that, we also have partnered closely with the Design Council in recent years to allocate funding for public art associated with our CIP process. But to add some predictability and maybe transparency to this allocation of funds for public art, this CIP includes a calculation that is 1.5% of our budgeted local funding and allocates that portion for public art in coordination with the recommendations of the Design Council. And that total is about $7.7 million in the CIP, again, for public art. So the manager noted the calendar earlier. I have a couple other dates here. The CIP will be presented to the Planning Commission in 2 days. That's important because by state statute, the Planning Commission is required to find that the CIP is in conformance with the Community Investment Plan. So that will occur on the 25th. Again, we'll have a public hearing on August 6th, and we have August 13th scheduled as the date for City Council adoption of the CIP and the operating budget. And with that, I'm sure staff would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions at this point? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item?
Good morning, Mayor Longwell, members of the council. James Roseberry. I'm here this morning representing the men and women of the Wichita Independent neighborhoods. I want to thank the staff for doing the work and getting the word out about this budget. I think Elizabeth and the work that we've had has been tremendous, and I want to thank you for that. However, at our council meeting last Friday, we talked about something that it's in the budget, and I understand that it will be increased, and that is the control of tall grass and weeds. We'd like to see more money in the budget added to that. Now, I understand it will be some additional money put in over the 90,000 that's there now to move it up, but we would like to see more money in there because the health of people in our neighborhood. I was watching TV this week, and I see where they're spraying for mosquitoes and other insects. And I think that if we got these weeds and grass under control, that would stop some of the allergies and the things that's happened. And so we would like to see that. And also, Mr. Manager, I wish you'd have got that saw just a little bit earlier because my car wouldn't be in the shop now with a tree limb falling on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Seeing no other speakers, we'll bring the discussion back to the bench. Again, this is just our first hearing, so any other comments to be made today? Seeing none, I would take the staff recommended action. Do we need to read all of that into record?
I don't believe so, Mayor. If I could just, one note I didn't make before. Today you will be locking in the dollar amount for the budget and the property tax requirements to support that budget. So any point at the next two hearings, if you decide to add expenditures, you'll need to offset that with a reduction someplace else in the budget. You'll not have the authority to increase the property tax or our total expenditures after that.
And obviously this year, we're still not bumping up against the tax lid.
Correct.
We're well under the tax lid.
Right.
And the mill levy rate is basically identical to what it was a year ago.
That's the recommendation.
So same mill levy, no issues with the tax lid, slight increase in revenue, which is also translating to a slight increase in spending. And I don't know if you remember the percentages, but if you go back just a couple of years ago, Bob, we were projecting as much as 5 or 6% budget deficit in the out years that you're showing today at 1.2%. Much of that obviously is because of the condition that we're in today, the increased revenues, the decrease in operating cost, and it's dramatically shifted. Do you remember what those percentages were in the out years?
Mayor, you're right. It was in that 5 to 6% range.
So I don't know if the public appreciates that, but that's a pretty dramatic change in a short amount of time when we look at, and that's why we always look at, oftentimes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in the future, and it's sometimes difficult to predict the future. But in this case, we tend to be a little conservative, which is a good thing, and it has shown up that we're in pretty good shape. Certainly for the next 2 years, and even beyond that, it looks like certainly the budget adjustments are well within our range and ability to make some changes. And I would argue that as we continue to see these investments in our community mature, we're going to continue to see our budget improve because of that. So, any other comments? So we are setting the maximum amount. We can, I suppose, always reduce that. So again, if I don't need to read it into record, I mean, it's lengthy, I'm happy to do that, but I would take the staff recommendation that does set the maximum mill levy, and I think we probably ought to read that in, 32.692 mills. And then the capital improvement district sets the mill levy at 7.050 mills. All of the rest of that we can take off of the official record of staff recommendation.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0, and again, this will allow the community then to see actual numbers as we go out and visit before the August 13th deadline. Madam Clerk, next item.
Fairway Meadows Lagoon Rehabilitation Project.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. For the record, my name is Don Henry, Assistant Director of Public Works and Utilities. The item before you this morning involves the rehabilitation of sanitary sewage lagoons located on the east side of Greenwich Road, south of 63rd Street South. And you'll see in the aerial on the right side of the slide, the three rectangular objects in the lower center portion of the slide are the three lagoon cells that serve the surrounding homes there. The system was permitted in 1977 by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment as a non-discharging lagoon system to serve the 150 residential lots of the Fairway Meadows subdivision. The system was acquired from Sedgwick County and part of a sewer capacity expansion project. The agreement with the county involved a number of assets that the city acquired, including the 4 Mile Creek sewage treatment plant, a number of sewer mains and laterals, lift stations, and the Fairway Meadows lagoon system. We currently have some functional and capacity loss issues with the lagoons. This is common with this type of system through time as we see erosion of the berms, the interior slopes, and accumulation of wastewater solids. This takes up storage capacity within the lagoons, and what has happened here is we've had a number of unpermitted but controlled discharges through time, and KDHE is now requiring the city to make some improvements under the existing permit. The photos here show that the lagoon is really full. There's very little operating freeboard. You can also notice rather than a kind of a smooth, gentle 3-to-1 slope, you see more of a straight up and down cut bank there. That's not a good situation, and all of the material that's eroded away is now on the bottom of the lagoon. The city hired professional engineering consultants, PEC, to look at a number of options to address the issues. Rehabilitation of the existing system is the most economical in terms of both upfront capital costs and ongoing O&M. It will involve increasing the berm height, removing sediment, and then regrading and stabilizing the slopes and installing riprap to prevent future erosion. Council adopted the existing budget of $500,000 in July 12th of 2016. Bids were received April 12th of 2019, and the lowest construction bid was $950,458. Drivers for the increased costs include the unique scope of work and the nature of work. There are limited contractors that are willing to do this type of work, and we found that across the state there's been similar circumstances with other like projects. The staff worked closely with KDHE to make design modifications to reduce the costs. This included limiting the amount of excavation that would be required, and instead of that, gaining the additional needed depth by steepening the side slopes, increasing the berm height, and doing the stabilization. It's estimated that this provides up to $200,000 in savings on the rebid. Therefore, $450,000 is needed for project redesign, construction, and oversight, and these funds are available in the 4 Mile Creek sewer plant expansion project. And so I'd like to conclude by providing staff's recommendations to council on this item to adopt the amending resolutions, waive City Council Policy Number 2 regarding the use of project savings to allow the transfer of funds, approve the revised budgets, and authorize the necessary signatures. And with that, I stand for any questions that you have.
Councilmember Fry.
Yeah, thank you, Don. Good presentation. I appreciate that. I just happen to notice, though, on the resolution related to the 4 Mile Creek reclamation, it appears we have a typo when it's talking about that total project.
Okay.
And the numbers. In one place it says $27,500,000, and in another place it says $27,050,000. So it looks just like a transposition of numbers. but I don't know that that reflects any change in our action today. It's just, I want to make sure we got that correction.
I can attempt to clarify, it may be a typo, but $27,500,000 is the amount of the approved budget for the 4 Mile Creek expansion project.
Okay.
The second amount would be the adjusted amount after the $450,000 is transferred to the Fairway Meadows project.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense.
Sure.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? This is much needed improvement, so appreciate it. We'll bring discussion back to the bench, and if there's no other discussion, I would move that we take staff recommended action.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item.
Extension of the project completion deadline for apartment commercial portion of EPC Delano project.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the City Council, Scott Rigby, City Manager's Office. Today we're here to discuss about an extension request from the EPC Real Estate Group for the Delano Catalyst site. The original benchmarks were 180 Class A apartment units, and a minimum of 90 hotel rooms of 3-star or better, a minimum of 5,000 square feet of commercial space with the completion date of October 1st of 2020. This is the initial apartment rendering back when the project was originally approved. This is the final design. EPC does have a permit for this project as we speak. This is an updated site plan, so you'll see the apartment complex over on the left, and then the hotel, which is increased in size from 90 to 95. Addition, the previously 5,000 square feet of commercial space that was anticipated in the north end of this site has now been integrated into the apartment complex. So the apartment complex will be increased from 180 apartments to 204 Class A apartment units. The hotel room increases to 95 rooms. TGC will be the developer of that hotel. And then the 5,000 square feet has been increased to 10,000 square feet. And that, in addition, that 10,000 square feet will be now integrated within the apartment complex building. The increase in the size will generate increased TIF for the project and for the city overall, and as well as long-term revenue to the city. Just a few details about the extension request. The project is not in default. They have till October 2020 with the existing deadlines. Again, the hotel is not part of the extension request. TGC is developing that hotel. The extension is only for the apartment and commercial space. The extension request is due to challenges related to the need to have AT&T relocate 2 fiber optics lines. They impact the start of the apartment building because the lines currently sit underneath where the apartment building would sit, as well as impact our Greenway Trail design. The city and EPC have been working diligently with AT&T since late last year to seek the AT&T approval to remove and relocate. AT&T is currently out to bid on this project with a hope of a completion in early September. Again, the extension is permitted on the current development agreement. Just as a frame of reference, the adjacent River Vista project, which is directly east of this, was also impacted by an unknown AT&T fiber line, which resulted in a similar request for an extension. That extension was approved. Again, the extension request the EPC has requested is to extend the deadline until June 1st, 2021. And again, staff recommends approving the extension request until June 1st, 2021. I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Scott at this point?
Scott, you talked about the potential for increase in TIF revenue because of the increase in the project. Can you tell us about how much?
Sure. So, Mayor, Councilmember Claycomb, originally we project the city may receive up to about $1 million after the TIF allocation for EPC. With the increased size, we could see up towards an additional $1 million for this project. And just overall for the TIF project plan, going back to day one we started the TIF project plan, which is not just this project but the entire stadium district. We had an overall TIF capacity of 28 million. 20 of that. 20 of that would be bonded for the stadium riverfront, Riverbank, McLean, parking, pedestrian bridge, as well as EPC, and then we left $8 million as pay-as-you-go. So that leaves between the $6 million of bond capacity for EPC and up to $3 million as pay-as-you-go after the initial 6. There's additional $5 million capacity that we could capture to use for, let's say, additional stadium debt service or greenway improvements if you want to continue west.
Thank you.
That'll take a change in the TIF application, though.
We built it in.
Mayor, if you're talking about the additional $5 million, that's built within the overall TIF plan. So if EPC hits their limits of TIF, then that revenue would come to the city, and we could disperse that as we see fit.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll go out to the public. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. Councilmember Clayco.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Scott, for the update on this. This is the first and only extension I hope that they will ask for. So I'd like to move that we, City Council extend the apartment commercial segment completion date until June 1st, 2021.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
Approval of travel for council member Brandon Johnson to travel to Miami, Florida, August 1st through August 4th, 2019, to attend the Young Elected Officials Conference.
I would move that we approve that travel, and how many more years can he consider himself young?
Why did I get invited?
Second.
Got 2 years. Cutoff is 35.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
Council member appointments and comments.
Any appointments needed today? Any comments? Maybe some needed. We'll hold back on a few right now. I would move that we adjourn today's council meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Cast your vote.
Vice Mayor, would you recast your vote, please? Thank you.
They shut you off.
I've got it. Thank you.
Motion passes. Again, you guys are gonna have to work on that. We had a whole day of unanimous votes. We're adjourned.